getting pledges for the UJA, I'd walk along King Street with George Pollock, he was my partner, and a guy called Sam Taylor. And we just go from one store to the other. And King Street was just 50%, maybe 60% Jewish. Yeah.
Can you name some of the stores?
Alt Hill, Baby Shop, nursing equipment was the Bubes. Levinson's were the shoes. Rainbows was for dresses, what had. Then there was the Halpern boys. They had, I forget the name of their store, but they sold dresses as well. And then there was Les Rolfe's store, and then Mrs. Wonder had hats. Let me get on. Lou Davidson had suits. Lyons family had clothing, men's clothing on James Street. Who was it that had the furniture? It'll come to me on James Street.
Zach's. Gordy Zach?
No, that's later. That's later. Gordy Zach's father had a anything used on York Street. That's where they started. His dad had a store there. And there was another guy, we used to call him harness maker. The Jewish guy, he made harnesses. So they gave him a name, the harness maker. And on Saturday night, they'd sit out on the street, and you'd walk by Motzei Shabbos. Everybody was on the street, all the boys and girls, our age group, kids. And the Rosenbergs had a grocery store. The Yaffes had a grocery store. Then, yes, and the Scots, a delicatessen, was on York and Caroline. And they were butcher shop. There was Gelber and two other butchers, Mr. Scott and another chap, I can't remember his name. But we used to go there. That was a hangout for the Jewish kids, the teenagers. And we had a rule. If any of us were going to Toronto, we'd stop at Scott's and pick up anybody that needed a lift. And we had a place in Toronto where you went, if you were coming home, you got a lift. So we'd sometimes have 10 in a car. But the girls went there to meet the guys. We went there to meet the girls, their girls. And it was very popular. Edie Roken, that was her father's. Her name was Scott.
Right. How about fast forward a few years, the business thing, the Jewish businesses. Who was involved in business? Besides the retail, talk about other areas.
There was the Pacons. The Pacons were in the plumbing and heating wholesale business. Barney Pacon died a very young man, and his wife ran it until she sold it. And then there was the Waxmans, Chester and Morris. They had a truck, and their dad had a horse and wagon. But they graduated to a truck, and I remember, I can see them now, Chester and muscles like this. And they go out in their truck, and they started that way. They were a large family, and they were at the bottom of Railway Street, and they built that big business up. Then there was my brother, Max. My father bought the scrap business on Cannon Street, which was opposite the Cannon Street Shul, the Parlersche Shul, from Mr. Lax Sr., Sheridan Lax's father and Sam Lax's father. He had worked for him, and then he bought the yard. And my brother went to Park Business College. He got a bit of an education. And Max, my sister, graduated from there too. And my brothers, each brother went into it except my brother Sam. Sam and my brother-in-law, Morris, that was married to my sister, they started manufacturing bumpers for cars. In those days, you bought a car without a bumper. Then you had the bumper made the way you like it, designed either high, low, or whatnot. And the scrapyard was right across the road from the shul, and it was closed on Saturdays. Now they worked, my brothers worked there, but my father wouldn't work there. And my brother was a visionary. He always looked ahead. When we built this shul, and it was going to cost us $1.5 million, and we were a congregation of about 70 families, most of them peddlers. And he said, we're going to build a proper shul for the future, not for this, but the future. So I said, Max, how are we ever going to pay for it? He says, with inflation dollars. He says, $1 will be worth 10 cents by the time we're through. The mortgage, people will be lined up to take that mortgage. They're so secure. And that's what happened. Then we built the mikveh. We built a rabbi's house, and then we built the mikveh. And the mikveh, a guy had a dream, a Mr. Siegel. Oh, the Siegels had a shoe store on York Street. And he had a dream, and he came to Rabbi Green with a carrying bag, a shopping bag, you know, the old ones. And he had about $10,000 in cash. And he gave it to the rabbi, and he says, I had a dream, you've got to build a mikveh. Here's the money, Rabbi. And that got it started. Raised enough money to build it. I'm giving you some background, not in its rightful order. But getting back to my brother, my mother and 4 brothers, 3 brothers, Max, Sam, Saul, 3 brothers and my sister were in Europe. My father came over and worked for Lax and saved money. Got enough money saved to get for my mother and the kids, but the agent he worked with never sent the money, never sent the tickets or anything. And then war broke out, the First World War. After that, the Russian Revolution. So they were separated for 10 years. In the meantime, my father was going nuts. And eventually, they came over in 1921. I was born in 22 here. I was a love baby. And Max, when my father died, Max became our father. I was 11. And Max became like a father to all of us. My brother-in-law, Sam and Morris, eventually that business of bumpers faded when the cars came with bumpers. But I must tell you, while they were making the bumpers, they also made Christmas tree stands, you know. And they had almost like a little swimming pool with a board across it, but in there was oil. They had to dip everything in that oil. And I went there on a Yom Tov, and they were working, and I crossed this thing and fell into the pool.
So Max is instrumental in...
So Max, when my dad died, Max took over and built the scrap business into a good business. And one summer, when I was at Westdale, he said that him and Mr. Anishevsky in Welland had a chance to buy a bankrupt stock of a plumber who had a hardware store in Welland, on the main street of Welland. And he says, I was just finishing I finished my grade 12. Yeah. I didn't get my senior matric, but junior. And he said, we're going to buy this place for $1,000. And Mr. Anishevsky and I thought that his son and you could go and liquidate it. Pay us the money that you owe us, that we paid, and you guys could keep the profit. So that's what we did. I went down to Welland. I lived with the Anishevskys, and Bunny, not Bunny, but the older brother. It'll come to me. We spent the summer, June and July, and at the end of July, we not only paid them back, but we had about $500 each, and we still had an inventory. It looked like nobody touched it. But he wanted to become a doctor, a pediatrician. So I bought him out, and we moved it to Hamilton, into Queen Street, no cement floor, a building with just a dirt floor, and that's how we started the plumbing business, which eventually grew into branches. We had about 11 branches, and we had about 250 employees at that time, at the height of it. And then when my brother Max, Sam, and my sister died within about 18 months of each other, and that knocked me for a loop. I just wondered what it was all about. I had an opportunity to sell the business. My sister-in-law, my brother, who were all partners, they agreed and we sold them. I regret it because I was too young. I was 42. And I got into the music business. Muntz. Do you remember Muntz? I took that company public, and we went across Canada. We had about 112 franchise stores. Selling tape. We were the largest distributor and seller of tapes, deck tapes for cars, and cassettes subsequently. It was changing so fast, and it didn't do so well. What happened was the car manufacturer started making it original equipment, and so that faded. But yeah, we did a hell of a good job in the plumbing and heating business. Oh, I might tell you, the EMCO, which was a big distributor, and the others were all Gentiles. We were the first Jewish guys in the business in Ontario, and they didn't want us in the business. And they told the manufacturer, you sell those Jews, you don't sell us. And a couple of Jews, one of the major Anthys, who your father went partners with Bud Wilmot. Does that ring a bell? He sponsored Bud later that bought Anthony's Imperial. They made saw pipe and boilers. My brother said to me, Dave, we've got to support this guy because he told EMCO, he said, nobody tells me who I sell to. And I mean, that was a big decision because these guys had branches across Canada doing hundreds of millions of dollars, or not, I should say hundreds, but whatever. Max said, you're going to go to Toronto. No, he wanted me to go to Carnegie Tech and become an engineer. I said, no, I want to be a businessman. So he tried his best. He got people to talk to me, Judge Sweet and the rabbis in town and whatnot. I said, no, I want to be a businessman. He said, okay, we've got to support the guys that are selling us because they're losing business from the other guys. You go to Toronto, open up a place, a plumbing contracting place, and we'll sell you stuff, and you take it. And in the meantime, that's what I did. It was in 1939, and the Jewish guys were just starting building in Toronto. Sharp, Izzy Sharp, Louis Sharp, Cadillac, Greenwood, all these guys I got to know, and they were the builders in Toronto. And I had about 60 plumbers working for me, and we were going hell-belt. And I buy everything from the Hamilton wholesale. We gave this guy so much volume because all the apartments on, what's this, Avenue Road, you know, when you go up Avenue, I supplied all those. All the guys, the furriers that became builders, the guys became multimillionaires. And that's how we compensated the goodwill that these guys helped support us. After a while, I was accepted. I was running the plumbing business. I was accepted after the war, when I came back from the Army, we were accepted. And there was a convention at the Scenery Club in Quebec that's between Ottawa and Montreal. It's a 5-story log cabin hotel, a lovely old place. And UNRWA wanted to hold a meeting there. And one of the directors of UNRWA was Lehman, of the Lehman family of New York. When he heard that they don't normally allow Jews, he canceled the UNRWA meeting. They then changed. And that's when I was in the plumbing business.
Yeah.
I was in, and I became on the board of directors of that institute, the Plumbing Heating Institute, and Macher and then a couple more Jewish guys from Montreal. They wanted to become members, and I could see that there was anti-Semitism there. They wanted to keep them out. I said, no, you stop that, I stop. And I says, I'll let everybody know what kind of guys you guys are, just even talking to me about that. And they were admitted. Because without that, these guys, the president of Crane told me to come down to Montreal, and he said, Dave, you're doing a hell of a good job. You're a good competitor. But we suggest that you don't touch hospitals or institutions or industrial business. The housing business you can have, but don't touch that. I told him to go to hell. I walked out of there and took hospitals left and right. We moved into a building, 250,000 square feet on King and Sanford, and I stocked every hospital that went up for about 5 years. I got.
You've got a great memory.
No, I'm scrambling all over the place.
Okay, talk about Bronte. What was this
Bronte, okay. When my father died in 1933, my brother Max, he died in June. My brother Max says, listen, I'm going to rent a cottage in a place called Bronte. And Pa died. We all need to sort of get away from it all. So he rented a cottage, an old cottage. When we rented that cottage, the Granicks, which were the Sheuchet, and his sons were in automotive. They rented the one next door. And we had a lovely time. You know, in those days, 11-year-old kid. And we stayed there. We rented it. Then we rented a nicer place the next year. And each year crept up until this cottage, while I was overseas, my brother sent me a letter. He says, this beautiful cottage has come up for sale right on the lake. And I think it was $4,000 or $5,000, which was then a lot of money. He bought it, and it was a lovely place. 5 bedrooms with another bedroom where anybody that had a kid had to stay there. If you had a baby, that's where you went. There was a bathroom. There was a room like maybe 12 by 12. But you just stayed there to sleep so that you didn't disturb everybody else. And my brother chose Bronte because we could drive out there after work every day. We didn't want to see our family away for weekends. And we'd all drive out there. And by the way, the Queen Elizabeth didn't have crossovers. They had lights. There was lights on the Queen Elizabeth. I'll tell you why. I know. I smashed into a truck and the engine went into the back seat. I came out without a scratch. But then some other families. Let me see. I made some notes here. The Zuckers came. The Netkins came. And that was about all the Hamiltonians. But while we were out there in my day, before the war, and because I got married in England, so I was already a married guy. But before the war, there was 200 Jewish families there. The others were all from Toronto. And they also went there because they could come and go in their cars and be there every day. And we had a nice community. There was a building that the Toronto Social Services took, and poor people, mothers with children, during the hot summer, they came up for 2 weeks. And they could house about 30 families. And I know some of the grandsons of those people that were there who are today multimillionaires and professional people, well known and so forth. As a matter of fact, my son-in-law is very close with a couple of guys that were kids at that time out there. And we had a guy by the name of, I forget his first name, but a little short guy, Katz was his name. And he was a very frum guy. On Shabbos, on Friday afternoons, you could smell challah throughout Bronte. His wife was making challah. And we'd go there to daven. And he had a Sefer Torah there, and he raised money for the yeshiva in Toronto. And remember, I asked him once, we had guys coming every day to Bronte to collect money for something or another. So I said, Mr. Katz, I was just a young guy, how do you know all these guys are honest? He says, to make a false dollar, you got to have a good one first. In Yiddish. And so he taught me, don't worry about that. 90% will be okay. And that way he was that guy. And then I had a girlfriend. Lurie and Saunders were in Toronto. They made ladies' cloaks, coats. A well-known little company up in Spadina Avenue on the 10th floor somewhere. And she and I were 14 or 15. They had young kids, puppy love type of thing. But I must tell you a funny thing. Don't you record some of this stuff? We never drank in our house liquor. And so when I went to Viv's cottage, and while I was waiting, I went to her brother Al. He was their salesman. And he was a well-known guy and socially with the girls and ladies. He was married at the time. And he said to my girlfriend, somebody's drinking my liquor. It was gin. She said to me, are you drinking? I says, you know I don't drink. She said, well, this bottle on my brother's bedroom is gone down. He says somebody's drinking it. I says, I thought it was hair tonic. I was putting it on my hair, putting it down.
That's good.
Yeah. And then we'll come to, this is before the war. This was in the 30s. Yeah. There were a pile of girls out there where I was, older than me, some of them, not all. The guys from Hamel decided to come out, and they'd come out on a weekend, on a Saturday night, and there was a dance hall, and a guy owned it, and he was a sweet guy. He was like trying to talk Jewish even. And our mothers would come and sit around on the outside, and they'd sit like this, watching us dance. We had the Nickelodeons there, and the guy even got kosher hot dogs for us. Yeah. And every Saturday night, the guys here, I phoned my sister Frida, because she met my brother there. Abe Lebo met his wife Ray there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the Lebos they lived in Toronto. They were also in the schmutta business. Her and her brothers were there, and her sisters. But Phil Rosenblatt, Dave Miller, Chuck Matchett, Max Kaplan, Sid Kessler, they were amongst that I could remember that came out. And there'd be 2 carloads. They'd come out. And there'd be a lot of girls there. And they'd dance with them. that was the Jewish section. Across the river was the Goyish section. They had a sign, no Jews or dogs allowed. They had it right out there. We take it down, they'd put it up. They'd take it down, they'd put it up. It was an anti-Semitic place. Even the drugstore, Allen Drugs. My mother used to say, the Goyish Chazer. The grocery store. But we used to buy all our stuff in Hamilton, you know, the kosher butcher, Mrs. Rosenberg, and so forth. And whoever needed stuff phoned. Are you coming out tonight? Yep. Okay. Would you do me a favor? Pick up this, pick up that, and I'll pay you when you get out there. And that went on. And from Toronto, we used to get good stuff from Toronto because we called the Toronto folks that were living around us. Then, yeah, the dance hall. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hadassah wanted, this was after the war. Fran was already with me. We had a baby. They wanted to have a night, and there was a pier that jutted out into the lake with the lighthouse. And every night you could go out there, and there'd be guys with the guitars and what have you. And then where we lived was all stone, so we'd have a big bonfire going there. And they came out and they had one of their social nights there. Everybody that was in Hadassah and the age group I was, Fran in her chapter, came out, and we used to have a wonderful time. I must tell you, this cottage was right on the lake, on an acre of land, which I sold for $25,000 when I was the estate guy. We had tenants there that didn't pay. And the guy was a jerk, and his wife, Nebuch, had 5 kids. Now, he didn't make any money. They were on relief. She couldn't pay the rent. I couldn't kick them out. So I think they owed 4 years of rent. So, yeah, this is after my girls and the folks decided they don't want to come out to the cottage anymore. They want to go to camps. And my sister was getting tired of being in the kitchen, took me out, because on a Sunday, it was like a park. People came, and we were busy feeding them and what have you. So they got to them. So I finally sold it. Now there's a 10-story apartment building on it, on the property. But while we were in the cottage, the post office in Hamilton, which is now the courthouse, okay, that was a post office and converted. But prior to that, there was a post office there, built with red sandstone. And it was wrecked to make room for this big post office. Max bought the stone, had it delivered to the cottage, and he put it as a breakwater along the lake because the lake was getting high and it was eroding the land from the cottage down to the lake. Now, in those days, they built a building with like little people, sculptured things, you know, fleur-de-lis, angels and whatnot. And that was all put in front of the cottage. And people walking along the lake would say, "Look what the water did." And we'd have a lot of fun. It was a wonderful place. The Jewish community got together all the time. There was lots of company. And the fact that we could get out every night. My brother Solly, you know, he worked with his overalls. And Schmutzik, from working in the scrapyard, he'd drive out, whip his clothes off, and off the pier into the water. And we'd all go swimming. Get there about 6 o'clock. Boom, go in for a swim.
Do you remember when Israel was founded? Was there a big to-do here?
1948.
Yeah.
In 1948, well, we had a big family in Israel. A whole kibbutz, Shvayim. Do you know where it is? It's before you get just after Herzliya.